In 10 days, we have the opportunity to drain the swamp. It is time to bring an outsider from Florida to DC. It is time to bring common sense from Florida to DC, a businessman, someone that is going to make America safer, affordable, and is going to make America great again. Please help me welcome our next Congressman, Cory Mills.
I think you guys can hear me without the mic, right? Yeah. I mean, we don't hire. Use the military voice. All right, so let me give you a quick 30,000 foot view on me. Then I'm going to go ahead and just talk about a couple of things and then turn it over. So I'm a sixth generation Floridian. I was born and raised in Central Florida, a little tiny town called Winter Haven, and then grew up in Auburndale. After graduating from high school, I ended up going off to the military, served in the United States Army, served in the 82nd Airborne Division, served with JSOC's TJ 20 for Iraq, which is the Joint Special Operations Command, and then decided that after my military service, I wanted to come back and kind of give back to my community. When I came back, I started college at UNF, right up the street at CCJ, which is right there in Jacksonville. Lived there for a few years and found another need for the government to call me back. Went back to service for another 5 years, helping overseas in wars that we all can admit has done nothing for us as a nation. Wars in over 2.5 decades has spent trillions of dollars. Wars that over the last 2.5 decades has cost us thousands of more Americans. You know, our whole concept for trying to go after those who come after us, I'm not opposed to. The idea of ensuring that the homeland is safe, I'm not opposed to. The idea of interventionism and nation building is where I have my biggest issues. If we would have stuck to a counterterrorism operation that actually went after those who were responsible and then stopped, I could have actually gotten behind that. But the reality is it became political football. When I saw that this political football was going on, and I was seeing where the neocons and the neolibs were the ones who were actually enriching themselves off these wars that a lot of the guys that I served with didn't come home to, that's where I started having an issue. When I came back, I wanted to start looking at job creation. I believe very strongly that the private sector creates jobs, not the federal government. Yeah. The federal government that we see as business owners, they stifle us. They overregulate us. They overtax us. They try and force us to shut down with unconstitutional mandates. This is not job creation. As someone who has signed the front of checks, not just the back of checks, I can tell you that we need to empower our private sector and remove federal government from our lives. I'm a huge advocate of limiting federal government overreach. I'm a huge advocate of state and individual rights. I don't think that a federal government needs to tell us how to raise our children. I don't think that the federal government needs to tell us how to do our business in Florida. I don't think the federal government has a right to step into our homes to tell us how to live our lives. You see, I believe in something which is the inalienable rights. This, in my opinion, even surpasses our Constitution because it's our God-given rights. Things like the right to protection that we take as the Second Amendment. Think about the rights of us being able to have the rights as parents to tell the federal government what our children will and will not be taught. We don't need sexualization in our schools. Nope. What we need is we need civics, we need history, we need mathematics, we need English, we need the skills to actually advance our children. Not federal government trying to indoctrinate them with CRT and things like the 1619 Project. You see, in my personal opinion, the federal government has tried after this, and again, I just talked to a few minutes ago, after the 17th Amendment, you saw this federal growth that occurred because our U.S. senators used to be controlled by our state legislators. They were actually elected by them. What you saw in 1913 was two things that were bad. One, 16th Amendment for federal income tax. I'm a consumer taxpayer tax guy. I don't think anything that we earn or anything we invest should be taxed. If you really want to worry about fair tax everybody the same. Now, the other thing is that I don't think that our Department of Education should be setting the standards for each of our individual states. I also don't like the idea that taxation on us allows the Department of Education, for example, to control who gets the large government and federal contracts for our foods. They don't understand. I grew up, like, for example, as a young kid with allergies. And I was adopted by my grandparents. I came from a bit of a broken home. My mom and dad were both drug addicts and had substance abuse issues and were in and out of prison my entire life. So I was kind of homeless and bounced kind of house to house, couch surfing with my friends until I was about 9 years old, whenever my grandparents finally found out and adopted me. But I remember that my grandparents were really big on the ideas of having like orange blossom honey. at certain times, which made sure that I had the necessary histamines to stop. What I would like to see is the federal government does not control where our foods come from, but that money which is passed from there stays within the states, is allocated to the individual counties, allocated to individual schools. Let the schools do the RFP, RFQ so we can actually support businesses in our local areas, support local growers in our areas. See, I'm an agriculture guy. I believe in the idea that food security is directly related to national security, which is why I don't care if you call me a xenophobe. I don't care if you look at my skin and say I have some type of specialized privilege. I believe that we should have zero foreign ownership and purchase of our farmlands in America. 8% of Florida's GDP, 1.8 billion, is based on agriculture. But here's the worst part. We could far exceed that. Florida provides over 80% of sugar to the rest of the country, but yet it's constantly being vilified by federal agencies like EPA that, in my opinion, needs to be abolished. We also need to take a further step, not just to, as I talk about the 16th Amendment, but talk about the idea of what is really a deep state police force. That's what that 87,000 IRS agents are. That's why they need $600,000 in small caliber ammunition. That's why they have roles and responsibilities like issuing deadly force, like being able to detain, being able to do search and seizure. Now, that doesn't sound like auditors looking to try and come after your tax and your 1040-EZ. That sounds like someone who understands that you will comply much easier at the end of a barrel than you will at the end of an ink pen. That's why I will not fund. The one thing federal Congress has is the purse strings, and I will not fund the 87,000 deep state IRS agents that are coming here. I won't do it. I also believe in giving Americans their freedom back. And I think that the only way we can do that is by repealing the Patriot Act. I think the Patriot Act was put in place to actually spy on us. And that's exactly what we've seen. Think this for one moment. As someone who worked in the Trump administration, who was actually endorsed by President Trump, we just watched where the federal government violated his Fourth Amendment rights as a former president of the United States, in my opinion, the actual president of the United States. I support the 50-state audit because we know where the fraud came in. And here's my whole thing. If you don't believe that there's any fraud whatsoever, you don't need to be in this room with me. And I'll be honest with you. Because it's not about how large or how small. Point is that if we're trying to continually make sure that we are a more perfect union, that we are the constitutional republic that we try to represent, then we should always be open to the ideas of a 50-state audit, ensuring that we limit any and all fraud that happens in our elections. So my biggest thing is this. I believe in ensuring that our federal government is limited in its overreach into our lives. I believe in U.S. term limits and hope that we see a 34-state convention of states that allow a U.S. term limit to occur for state and House. I believe in ensuring that we do not take our down ballot voting for granted any longer. We really need to understand that these mayoral, these city council, these school boards that we have been taking for granted and trying to prop up these federal races to be some type of a celebrity congressional caucus is not what's important in our day-to-day lives. If anyone is a constitutionalist, you understand the first three articles and why they are so aptly architected. You know, the first article, which covers legislation, is about 3 times the length of everything else. The second, which is the executive, is obviously about half that length. And the third, which is judiciary, is about a third of the actual half that the executive branch has. The reason why is because they understood that they only give the most powers and biggest roles and responsibilities to those that the American people have the most outreach and most touch with. That was intentional. But over time, we've continued to dwindle down and dilute the actual state legislators' roles. Roles like our great representative here. So I encourage everyone, and as I've even talked with Tara and I've talked with Avia, I think as Republicans, we need to come together and understand that when we go out, we can't have this idea where at the federal level, I've got 30 and 40 walkers out there knocking doors and we're getting the votes out, we're doing all this. Meanwhile, we're ignoring what's happening at the state and local levels. We need to actually be working more together. Where my 30, 40 walkers is walking for you, your 5 or 6 volunteers are working for us, your 2 or 3 is actually coming together. That's how we build a better community. That's how we build a stronger state. We must understand that it's really getting back to the basics of constitutionality. It's about making sure that we stop things like ESG and this wokeism in our corporations. Stopping CRT in our military, which has now led to a 15,000 person reduction in shortage. Stopping CRT and indoctrination and sexualization of our children in our schools. I believe very simply, less or zero CRT and ESG and a lot more GOD.
Come on.
God is one of the main things that they have continued to attack. We know that's one of the fundamental truths that we are, as our Constitution is based on the Judeo-Christian beliefs, are built on those inalienable rights I talked about. The left has continued to try and whittle us down little by little. First, by trying to act as if we have an agnostic or godless Constitution. But how did all of our founding fathers sign their names in their actual documents in the year of our Lord? Doesn't sound too godless or agnostic to me. The other thing that we understand is that whenever the left, the socialists and Marxists are allowed to remove faith, remove God from our schools, from our houses, from our communities, that their next thing is to go ahead and continue to divide us. And they've gone forth and they've continued to do this, utilizing our ignorance and our silence. We're the majority. But for far too long, we've been the silent majority. I don't believe in the corrupt practices that are going on. I believe in banning the ideas that any elected official in the federal government should be able to buy, sell, and trade stocks, their spouse, or anyone who works in their office. It should be about public service, not personal enrichment. Every one of our founding fathers were successful businessmen. They left their tobacco crops, their agriculture, their distilleries, for those who understand the history of George Washington and his distilleries. And they would go off to Washington. Let me tell you, they were eager to get back to their successful businesses. Well, over time, we've flipped that. And we've made politics now a very, very financially beneficial business, where people are going in and making all their riches there, and then basically not wanting to come back and return home. We shouldn't be creating this as a career. No one understands public service like those of us who have actually fought in uniform. Let me tell you something. When we take that oath, just because we remove our uniform doesn't mean that oath expires. We believe in the ideas of fighting for our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But the reality is that the enemy within is right here at home, domestic. We don't need to fund, and again, I've said this and I'll continue to say it. I'm not an interventionist, but I'm not an isolationist. I'm a protectionist. Protecting American rights and liberties, protecting our borders and our sovereignty, protecting our way of life, protecting American exceptionalism. These are things that we should all be able to subscribe to. These aren't left or right issues. These aren't Democrat or Republican issues. These are America versus anti-America issues. In my business, we actually support over 200 law enforcement departments, SWAT, HRT, SRTs. And I can tell you right now, the one thing that we stand for and we believe in is the idea of defending our law enforcement, not defunding our law enforcement.
Amen.
And so I'll leave you this. I've got a couple of things that I've been talking about as far as bills that we've drafted. I don't believe in doing this OJT. We step in and we just play the freshman card and follow leadership. Leadership doesn't elect me in. The people elect me in. The party doesn't elect me in. The people elect me in. But that's also the same reason that in order to not be corrupted or tainted in any way, I'm volunteering 100% of my salary to be donated back into the community to a woman, child, or veteran charity by you. I believe in fighting for the people. I believe that's a conviction that I have since birth. I believe that I've been spared continuously in multiple situations to be here right now. I've seen what's happened in Ukraine. I've been a geopolitical analyst. I know where and what is going on when it comes to the Russia, China, and Iran geopolitical alignment. I know that kinetic warfare doesn't make us safer abroad, but economic resource dominance does. I believe in the ideas that we cannot stay as a superpower if we don't get in control of our gross domestic production, our security of our nation. We have to take that $80+ billion that we're fraudulently and corruptly placing in countries like Ukraine and invest those here at home.
Amen.
We need to build 2 refineries so that we have the ability. We need to make sure we get the Keystone XL pipeline in play. We need to make sure that we open more federal land to exploration, more drill permits, more concessions, and understand that the currency of the world is energy. We have the ability tomorrow to make lives cost affordable. We used to be a society that lived on a single income family. Now we can barely survive on 2 income family. We know the 40-year inflation is not just by mistake, but it's a plan to the modern monetary theory. The idea by the left and socialists that I can create enough debt because I create my own currency to make more currency to then drive up more inflation, because what am I trying to achieve? Demand destruction. They know that what's happening abroad with the China, Russia, Iran One Road, One Belt initiative is to try and cut off all of our supply chains to the Western Hemisphere, because Russia, China, and Iran will control Africa, Oceania, the Eurasian expansion, which gives them the Horn of Africa, Black Sea, Red Sea, Mediterranean, where all of our actual supplies come in and out. And meanwhile, to advance this, we have the left who is trying to attack fossil fuels and American energy, going towards renewables, not reliables, renewables, where China controls 15 of the 16 rare mineral mines. We don't harvest cobalt, nickel, lithium here at home. In fact, we just gave $1.3 trillion in lithium to the Chinese when we handed over Afghanistan. So the reality is this: you want lower cost to cool and heat your house? Natural gas, right here in America. You want to put trucks on the road to transport supplies, get us back and forth to work cheap, make sure that our tractors run? Oil and gas.
Drill,
Right
baby,
under our feet.
drill.
Drill, baby, drill. So I don't support the ideas of us continuing to fund and support adversarial nations like China and Russia who are out to destroy us, who are out to eliminate the US dollar from being the global currency, who are out to try and drag us into the quagmire of another endless war that won't result in us being any freer or more powerful, but will actually end up revolving us to have more Americans, more sons, more husbands, more fathers lost, to start resulting in billions and billions of dollars being wasted, our money as taxpayers, to seeing our economy start to dwindle, because their ultimate goal is they won't be happy until they have removed God from our lives, they have destroyed our Constitution, they have created the WHO and WEF as the New World Singular Government Order, which is what they want. And they want to empower everyone else while impacting us militarily, diplomatically, economically, and politically. We need people in Washington who actually have the moral courage to call out things.
Yes. Mills,
We
Mills,
need
Mills,
people to
Mills.
understand.
Mills.
At the end of the day, I wish there was a machine. The greatest medical invention in the world will be a machine that could actually inject a spine and half the Republicans are actually fine. I mean, they say as invertebrates that we're not supposed to be able to walk upright, and somehow politicians do it every day. So I took that from Ted Cruz. He just said that yesterday. It was hilarious. But the reality is that I wasn't elected in. I didn't have any PAC and lobbies in my corner. I funded my own campaign. I didn't grift off the American people. I'm donating my salary back. I pledged my wife, myself, and others won't buy and sell and trade stocks. And guess what? I also won't be silenced, whether it's by the left, the right, by leadership, because they owe nothing to me. I owe nothing to them. I owe everything to you.
Love you, Cory.
Thank you so much. God bless.